The global health crisis hasn't stopped forms of injustice from happening, and it hasn't stopped thousands from taking to the streets to protest against these injustices. Yet mass gatherings can increase the risk of spreading coronavirus. So, are you even allowed to protest during a pandemic? Lockdown restrictions are being lifted, but to avoid transmission of the virus, the government's advice is still to avoid large crowds, so that includes protests, and maintain a 2-metre distance from people in public, which can be pretty tricky if you're on a march. So, do activists think it's possible to protest safely during a pandemic?
First and foremost, safe protest means social distancing. I think the protests that have happened so far during the lockdown have actually seen people generally being really conscientious about that. I'd encourage people to cycle to a protest though if you can. Not only do you avoid public transport, but actually having people pushing their bikes on demos helps maintain social distancing too.
What do campaigners think you should wear?
I think masks are appropriate on protests right now. We know that they're not a panacea. But they can cut the risk of virus transmission if we all wear them.
The government says that face coverings do not replace social distancing, but do advise for them to be used in crowded areas. Are there other protective measures those who protest can take? Health professionals have advised not to chant or yell, as this can spread droplets, but instead advise using things like noisemakers, drums, or just signs. They also advise to bring hand sanitizers to any events and avoid touching your face. But if protests can increase the spread of COVID-19, do campaigners believe people should be attending marches?
Protests have always been a really important part of how progressive change happens in society. And this crisis is highlighting, vital issues like inequality, like what kind of society and economy we actually want to build in the aftermath of the pandemic. So our ability to protest remains really important. And I think there's lots of ways we can be creative about making our voices heard in public spaces while staying at least 2 metres apart.
Despite the cause, police can and have arrested protesters for breaching coronavirus legislation. So, what are the other ways to support the cause without turning up physically?
Lots of the activities of campaigning and activism have become even more online during the pandemic, including meetings and talks. People are also finding their ways to show their support for causes on social media as well.